Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger. At Press Coverage, I'm looking to bring in the sharpest guests, and I'm looking to find you the edges you need to win in fantasy football. And I'm stoked today because this is the first time that I've ever had a chance to record with John Hansen. John, I don't need to rattle off your entire bio. You're one of the OGs in the industry. It's really an honor to have you here on Press Coverage, and it's even cooler to have you on. We're recording this like less than an hour after the Davante Adams trade. So we're going to get reactions to that. But first off, wanted to point out where everybody can find your work right now. You've been at Fantasy Points. You're crushing it. And specifically, John, you're like a shark with these NFL prop bets, man. Big props to you on that one. How are you doing today? And let everybody know about the great work you're putting out.
Well, thank you for the kind words there, Theo. Yeah, I kind of I'll start with this. Like, I feel like this is my destiny, player props, because I am literally I'm not bragging or anything. I'm just stating something that's interesting. I think I am literally the first human being on the planet to own the domain playerprops.com. I got it in the 90s because I was working also in the gaming industry for a casino gaming publishing company in Atlantic City. And that's kind of how I got the idea to do publishing. But I thought the player prop thing, I'm like, this is right in my wheelhouse. This is what I'm literally doing. I'm building projections every week for players, coming up with a number, okay, then over, under that number. So I'm like, this is going to be big, and I was like, well, I guess I got that wrong. So I paid for it for like 10 years straight. And then one year I just let it go and lapsed it because it wasn't happening. But, usually if I'm feeling something and I'm wrong, it eventually happens. And that was the case. But yeah, thanks to Fantasy Points data, it's just unbelievable. I've been doing this, like you kind of alluded to, for a long ass time. And I am a very intuitive person, and I am a big eyeball test guy. I'm always fascinated by how, like, I'm not a big math guy, yet I seem to always come up with the same answers as the math guys and the data people. So what's happened over the last couple of years is, I don't know how many people get significantly better at their jobs in year 29 or 28, but thanks to Fantasy Points data, now that I've got the old eyeball tests and, all the stuff I got going on in my noggin, but now I have data. So it's kind of up my game like 29%, which is a pretty absurd increase in year 29. So I'm loving life. I love getting stuff right. I hate being wrong. And like you mentioned on the props, I don't even know what the hell the number is because I'm doing a bunch of different things, in a bunch of different places. But over the last 3 weeks, my top 20 props on the site have hit like 80%, which is pretty darn absurd, unsustainable, but feeling pretty good so far.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And a big shout out to Brett Whitefield, who's been a guest on Press Coverage a couple times, Dynasty Life as well, for all the great work that he does with Fantasy Points data. And if you want access to John's props and also Fantasy Points data and pretty much anything else you want, use the code SCHOOL25. That's the code that I have from my podcast with Scott Barrett that we're doing every single week. So you can get your 25% off pretty much anything you want over there, but highly recommend it as well. And I'm dropping a Dynasty article every single week over at Fantasy Points as well. But John, we got to jump into it. Like, this is great when we actually get to talk about something that's breaking news. And even though you've been anticipating this trade going down with Davante Adams going to the Jets, it's still a massive, significant trade for us. And it's got ramifications for other players. We've seen Garrett Wilson's total targets just go nuts. He's got like 33 targets, over 20 catches combined in the past 2 games. You saw the London game where he went nuts, and then last night played fantastic. What does Davante Adams do specifically to Garrett Wilson?
I mean, he's going to hurt him. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's been a pretty significant volume situation there for Garrett Wilson. That's kind of been what he's needed, as they didn't seem to be totally on the same page there early on. I think that Garrett himself, and pure speculation, but what was that, like 3 weeks ago? He made some sort of comment about, I guess a lack of action and the old squeaky wheel situation. The dude's got literally 33 I guess it was 2 weeks ago. He's got 33 targets since then. I did see that coming against Minnesota. I'm like, that was one of my props. And I'm like, yeah, they're going to pepper him with targets in this one because the Vikings never shut down, by the way, number one receivers. Rarely. They just never have a shutdown corner. I know they've had multiple different systems. That's my favorite team, so I know them pretty darn well. And by the way, they never, I guarantee if you look at Davante Adams' game logs against Minnesota, they didn't slow him down either. You knew it was coming to him, and you still really couldn't stop him. And part of that is Adams and Rodgers being awesome. And by the way, last night I thought they did a great job getting Garrett Wilson open because that wasn't a very good matchup. I mean, a tremendous job. And that was like the most encouraging game because while he got 23 targets in week 5, he only caught 13 of them, 56% catch rate. Last night, 80% catch rate, 10 targets, 8 grabs, looked very, very good. I mean, it was a beautiful game, but I mean, will we get another one of these? I don't even know if we will. With Davante there. I mean, obviously, I was very high on Tyler Conklin, and he was a little bit banged up going into last night, but clearly Alan Lazard has ruined that. And I think that's what probably Garrett Wilson was kind of complaining about early on. It's like, yo, bruh, I know Lazard's your boy, but I mean, he was worthless last year. Meanwhile, I'm out here busting my ass, like throwing the ball, which they've done. But again, now with Davante there, I mean, he's going to take up a lot. Like, you got to feed Davante. I mean, he's more of a volume receiver than Garrett Wilson is.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. We had 3 consecutive seasons with 169 or more targets for Davante Adams in Vegas. I think that all the injuries are going to clear up pretty quickly as soon as he lands on that. Since he lands in Jersey or New York or wherever he's landing into. But let's also talk about it because you mentioned you thought that they did a great job at getting Garrett Wilson open. This was Todd Downing's first game as play caller, and I agree with you. There were some things there. We like seeing the screen passes, but Breece Hall, we saw a big bounce back week on Monday Night Football. This is really, really promising. Does this do anything with Breece Hall, or is it sort of like the pie grows larger argument? Adding this extra mouth to feed at wide receiver maybe creates more space for Breece Hall underneath. Or do you think it could potentially lower his target share as well?
I think it helps overall. I think it helps. I mean, we may not get, those blow up. Well, we're not going to get those blow up PPR games that we got from Tim Boyle last year, like dumping it off to Hall like 12 times a game, but we'll get more production from Hall, the runner. There were some really good calls last night and there were some really bad ones. A little bit of a mixed bag, but I was all over Breece Hall last night. I'm doing a show on VSiN. That was my Thursday night special. And I said, I'll take all overs on Hall. And my reasoning was, just some common sense. When you get a change like that, and granted, we got another change today with the Davante Adams trade. But when you have a big change like that, you fire the head coach, you demote the play caller, basically. Something's got to change, and it almost always does. So I was saying yesterday, like, I'm going to put myself in Todd Downing's shoes. Like, what would I do? Granted, I didn't think Wilson would go off because it was a tougher matchup, but what would I do? It's like, hello, I got to get Breece Hall going. I literally have to do it. Like, that's job number one, and that's kind of what happened. So yeah, I think it's a positive for Breece Hall. Sustain drives more, run off more plays, wear down the defense more. And here's one thing I said, and I can't even recall. I did say that. I'm like, here's the deal with a guy like Breece Hall. You must feed him. And this is why it's so infuriating. Granted, we can't have every damn touch in the backfield. That's one thing. And Braylon Allen's look good. But you got to feed that guy because he's a game breaker. The more you feed him, obviously, the better his chances of ripping off a long run are going to be later in the game. And sure enough, they did feed him. I like the over the carry total, and he ripped off a 42-yarder. So I think it's good for Breece Hall.
I love it. Completely agree with you. Todd Downing, when they made that play caller switch, I'm like, okay, here we go again. This is a guy who had a bottom 3 offense in Tennessee.
Right.
But at the end of the day, John, we saw exactly what we wanted to see out of Downing. the opening drive, 5 out of the game's 6 first offensive touches went to Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, and they also targeted Breece Hall on a incompletion. So they really did try to get him established. Hopefully that continues. And then we know Brock Bowers is going to absolutely crush it with no Davante Adams there. Do you think this is a situation right now? George Kittle, tight end 1 overall, Brock Bowers, tight end 2 overall, but there's a little bit of a gap points per game wise. Do you think this is a Brock Bowers to the moon situation where we see him even more heavily utilized now that the game plan is going to kind of shift? I know he's played without Davante Adams, but now we see that for the entire season, and the target competition there, and really the touch competition is about the worst it's going to be for Brock Bowers in his entire career. Sort of your expectations for him over the rest of the season.
Man, yeah. I mean, my man's going to be fed. You know, that was one of my top 10 props last week, over 5.5 grabs, and it was a pretty easy dub. I actually regret not giving Brock more love. I think a lot of us were, I don't know about fading, but I big regret, because I've also stated, you know, I'm like, he might be the best tight end guy I've ever seen,
ever.
You know, like you know what I mean? Like, I was a big Travis Kelce guy back in the day. Like, I really was. But I thought he would be very, very good. But Bowers is up another level, because he's like a glorified slot receiver. So I think he's looking good.
Big Jordy Nelson playing tight end. That's Brock Bowers. Like, I think it's the what he could do over the second half of the season, now that he's fully acclimated, now that sort of the shadow of Davante Adams is off of that team, it's the Brock Bowers show. I think he'll be the number 1 tight end selected in drafts in 2025 by maybe a considerable margin based on what we've seen out of the Kincaids and the LaPortas and all that. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to hit a number of topics that are going to help you win in week 7 and beyond. John Hansen here on Press Coverage. We'll be right back.
Oh, you know, every week I'm answering these start-sit questions on Sunday morning. I go to the weekly rankings on playerprofiler.com just to make sure that my instincts are correct, and sometimes they're not. And guess what? More often than not, I go with the projections. You may not feel great about starting Daniel Jones or Wan'Dale Robinson, but the projections say, hey, that's the move. It may not feel right, but you use those projections to get it right. That's the power of the Player Profiler system. It's Evan Ringler, it's Bradley Stalder, it's Theo Gremminger, of course, it's Billy Muzio making these rankings possible. The season rankings, so you know who to pick up, who to trade for. The Dynasty rankings are part of this. The offensive line rankings from Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. Then we get our cornerback rankings, which show which corners are matched up with which wide receivers. And now, in collaboration with the IDP show, we have IDP rankings. Did you know that? Did you? So go to playerprofiler.com, use promo code PODFATHER, get you 25% off the player rankings package right now at playerprofiler.com. Enjoy!
Welcome back to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger with John Hansen. And John, another one of the pieces you do every week that I think is really, really good. Not your longest article. You drop why don't you talk about your long form article that you drop every single week to kind of get you ready for the NFL games?
Well, that's Hansen's Hints. I've been doing it for a long time. And, you know, you say long form. And what's funny is I try and make it like a bullet point article, but
it's a lot. It's a lot of information.
There's so much. Yeah. I mean, I just can't put a take out there without backing it up. You know, it's not like the old days. I'll tell you a story, since you are also an OG type of person. One time when I started, I actually started before the internet was all that in 1995. And so the first 2 years I had a literal printed out hard copy newsletter. And 1 week I ran out of room. You know, you can only fit so many words. It was like a 4-sheeter. It was like you fold it up, stick it in an envelope and go. And it was Jamal Anderson. And the analysis, and because I found it decades later, and I just laughed hysterically. The analysis was, he'll be fine. That's it. That's all I said, because I had no room. And so I'm like, well, now I got to go back and I got to look. 18 carries, 118 yards, touchdown, caught 4 balls. Well, he was fine, but you can't get away with that now. But yeah, I like to think of it as an article that if you have or cryogenically frozen like Dr. Evil from Austin Powers and you got the thawed and you knew nothing, you could read that article in 15 minutes. You could win in fantasy that week. So it's pretty comprehensive. Yeah. But I think you were alluding to the players to trade for article, which I've been doing for a long time. Yeah. By the way, it's, I know we state this a lot. I'm doing it 20 years. But we noticed about 15 years ago, like, holy crap, this is like the most popular article. Like people love that stuff. So then I kind of really homed in on it. And I'm all about buy low, sell high. I'm all about this guy's value is going to rise going forward. Let's get him. This guy's value is going to drop going forward. Let's sell.
Yeah, so hold that thought, John, because when we get to the end of the show, John's going to let you know a player to trade for and a player to trade away. Maybe I'll give you a buy high as well. So let's rip through a couple of these topics. We're reacting to week 6. We're getting you ready for week 7 right here on Press Coverage. Tank Dell, we see the first game without Nico Collins, and Tank Dell gives us a really, really strong performance. He's heavily targeted early, which I love to see these guys get targeted in the first quarter, the second quarter. It means that they're really part of the game plan and not necessarily the game flow. But Tank Dell catches a touchdown in the first half, and he also finishes the game with a 37% target share. This is a guy that gave us a ton of usable weeks last year before getting injured, averaged over 16 points as a rookie, and now looks to be sort of fully back. Your expectations with him, with Nico Collins on the shelf, is Tank Dell like a weekly wide receiver 2 for you? Do you have any trepidation here, or is this like what you see is what you get from the New England game?
I'm in on Tank Dell. In fact, talking about that players to trade for article, and this is also a pretty good example of, me thinking things through and seeing things without even looking at the data. Our guy Ryan Heath did a big data dump breakdown on Tank Dell's potential or what's potentially going wrong with him. We don't know exactly why he wasn't crushing earlier in the year or was like underwhelming. We all knew it was going to be a pretty crowded receiving room, all that. But, I just added it all up and I'm like, Tank Dell is basically here. I'm going to read off the article, final sentence. He was too good last year. And Tank has answered his critics too many times for me to believe that he's just going to fade away in year 2, period. End of discussion. And here we go. So that was a good start. I talk about these interactions I have with these players a lot. Sometimes it annoys people, but again, I'm very good at I understood a lot about Tank Dell before I met the guy, so when I do in fact meet him, I get a good vibe. Great kid. I mean, I said it at the end of the interview, and I said it going into his rookie season. I'm like, do not doubt Tank Dell. The dude has literally been doubted since he was 6 years old. They didn't think he could play Pee Wee football when he was 6, but he's just like he's a dog. He's got that dog in him, and he goes about his business the right way. Great dude. So, we'll see. Nico, by the way, was somehow only 21st in target percentage, which is shocking to me. But it was still worth over 10 targets a game. So, without that, Tank is looking really good. Now, I guess it was your question, what about Tank when Nico's back?
No,
it's
not
going to be great.
Just sort of your trust level for Nico moving forward. Maybe the hierarchy with him versus Stephon Diggs. Basically, They're both weekly starts for you, John.
Yeah. And I think Dalton Schultz, I know he's been a little bit more active, but I would think that they've evolved or will evolve into a place where it's, it's a 3-headed monster, and Schultz is not much of a factor.
Schultz did well with the targets this past week. Didn't really turn him into much of anything, but the targets were there. I think one of the best things for Tank Dell moving forward was, and certainly for all 3 of the guys John mentioned, was the idea that Xavier Hutchinson could be this year's Noah Brown. That ship has sailed. So we're
he's
in
not very
good shape. No, that's a hard hitting breakdown right there from John. I included in my sleepers column. We had to prepare for Xavier Hutchinson, but yeah, you're right. They're not using him. He's an afterthought. So
I'm a Mechie guy. I don't know what's going on with Mechie though.
Yeah, that's a
You
good
know,
point. I mean,
I
Mechie
love
seems
Mechie.
buried there. He's just buried.
Yeah, and that's another guy where, again, not to be annoying, but when I request these interviews with these guys at the combine, they go up through the little media podium deal, and then the handlers bring them on over to me, and I was like, I got to talk with John Mechie, one of the greatest dudes ever, so friendly and affable and personable, like really rooting for that guy. I don't get it because he was balling out in the preseason. I don't know if you noticed that, but
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what's going on right now. What's he got? One target?
Yeah, it seems odd because again they moved on from Noah Brown, which made me think that they loved a Mechie or a Hutchinson or somebody behind these guys, but not really. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an odd situation, but at the end of the day, Tank Dell, we will absolutely take it. Staying with last week we had the Chiefs on a bye week, but the week before that, it was sort of a turn back the clock game where you had Kareem Hunt finishing as an RB1 and you had Juju Smith-Schuster with his first 100-yard performance since 2022. Your thoughts on both of these guys moving forward? Is this a, hey, they're back in our trust factor, or is it, hey, like, let's see, maybe there was a little self-scouting during the bye week and maybe we don't want to be too enthusiastic about these guys? Your thoughts on Hunt, your thoughts on Juju?
Well, first of all, early in the Juju career, I was a huge Juju person. But over the last 3 years, I've been completely out and I've been kind of like ripping him a little bit. The TikTok stuff's a little annoying, but I just don't see the same player. I mean, I see a guy who's compromised. So I'm like ragging on him. I hated him that year. He was pretty good with the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt, I was very high on his rookie year. I remember on Sirius, I was begging people. I had him in the second round that year. I'm like, remember, he fumbled that first game, and I got about 30, 40 tweets like, where's your guy? I'm like, oh, boy, uh-oh. But then, obviously, he crushed, and it was beautiful. But with him, I also stated 2 years ago, I'm like, you know what? I think he's done. However, in both cases, they looked like they did 3-4 years ago. Now, that could be a small sample and maybe they wear down, but I'm going to go positive with it. There's just something about playing with Mahomes and Reed and the Chiefs and Kelsey and the magical environment there. And some people, it builds them up and makes them even better. And some people, they can't really handle it, like Sky Moore, apparently. So, yeah, I was very high on Rashee Rice. And Juju essentially just stepped right into that Rashee Rice role. He's always been able to get open against zone and make himself an available target over the middle for Mahomes. So I think he's probably a wide receiver 1. And then Hunt, hell, running back 2. I mean, there's a lot of trust there, and he looked very good.
Yeah, I mean, Hunt was, they not signed, but it was sort of a perfect storm for him to return to Kansas City. And the guy did have 9 touchdowns last year. So I think I'm with you. I know Scott Barrett is on the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, could make a little dent, maybe get a little workload.
I can't believe that. That. Yeah.
That's all. Scott likes that one. We'll see. But yeah, I think I'm with you. I think Kareem Hunt is in your lineup. And Juju was a guy that last week a lot of people cleaned up on waivers. I think, yeah, you stick him right in the flex, stick him right in the wide receiver 3 slot. I don't think we'll necessarily see 130 receiving yards, but I think he's going to give you a usable week moving forward, unless they make a trade of some kind, which is also a possibility. There could be a cascade effect after this early Davante Adams deal. Sticking with last week, we saw first of all, like the Lions completely put it on Dallas. Dallas really needs the bye week. But any way you cut it, largely highly positive week for Ben Johnson and that offense. They came out slinging. Jahmyr Gibbs gets a 20% target share. We love seeing that. And Sam LaPorta, we end up seeing a touchdown catch, and it's sort of like a big sigh of relief, but that was his only target, and it was sort of on like a flea flicker play. But he gets a 56-yard touchdown catch. What's going on with LaPorta? What's going on with LaPorta rest of the season? This is such a dynamic shift from what we saw in his rookie season when he finished as the tight end 1 overall.
I think, some regression going on there. Dude's rolling with an 8% touchdown rate last year. Like 8% of the time he caught a ball, it was for a touchdown. I didn't think that was sustainable. He also had the injury. But I've been saying to trade for him for multiple weeks now, knowing that he does have what I call very good DNA. And I do that TV show on VSiN every day, and I had on 2 weeks ago Dr. Mark Addix, who played in the NFL, was a lineman for the Redskins back in when they won their last Super Bowl, and then certified orthopedic surgeon out of Harvard, so he knows the deal. And I'm like, we kind of guessed that LaPorta would play that previous Monday night based on his history. If you recall, the year before in the playoffs, I think it was a knee sprain, and I'm like, oh man, he's screwed. But he played well, so I think the biggest problem is simply Jared Goff is not throwing the damn ball. I mean, if you look at the attempts here, he had the 55 attempts in week 2, right? Again, in that shootout. But otherwise, we're talking 28, 23, 18, 25. The defense has been pretty good. The running game has been dominant. However, with Aiden Hutchinson on the shelf, that is a big hit to their defense, of course, and their pass rush. They're going to have to piecemeal it together. I mean, I feel like they lost 60% of their pass rush without Aiden Hutchinson. So I do believe they're going to have to throw more. So I would still target Sam LaPorta, who, by the way, I did love last week, and I had him as one of my top 5 props. A good example of luck is the residue of design, because I pivoted over to the receiving prop and it hit. One play, baby.
That's all
but
you
it
need.
was it was a big play, and the schematics of the matchup were good, and it did happen. But again, how many times did Jared Goff throw in that game? They didn't need Sam LaPorta in that damn game.
And that running game is an absolute machine right now. This is looking quite like we're going to see 2 RB1s come out of the same offense. For my big takeaway from them last week was heading into the bye week, we saw a diminishing total targets, target share, and routes run for Jahmyr Gibbs. We saw everything we wanted to see from Jahmyr Gibbs, at almost a near 20% target share last week. So for me, I felt great about that one. The Lions are just a machine. And yeah, I think it's with LaPorta. He's a little bit more touchdown dependent, but like John said, the dynamics could change. You could see a few more shootouts. You're getting that Minnesota game coming up as well, which will be a lot of fun. What about Bijan Robinson, John? So this is a one where Bijan gets 2 early touchdowns, which was just fantastic to see. Heading into week 6, he had 1 touchdown on the season, gets the 2 early ones. And that looks like it's going to be a insane game from him. Gets the 2 early touchdowns. Hey, maybe we're thinking this is going to be like a 40 burger from Bijan, but it seems like maybe they are trying to cap his touches, cap his usage, and really work in Algier. Bijan's going to be fine, but Algier is sort of like a constant headache, a flex consideration. So Algier ends up with 105 rushing yards and a touchdown, even with Bijan sort of putting up a huge number. Just sort of your thoughts of this Atlanta backfield. Is this sort of how it's going to be, or do you think the dynamics could continue shifting?
It's funny. The week before, I'm doing my worst on props for nationally televised games because, I feel like I got to find some props. I'm doing a show, I'm joking around this morning. It's like, oh, welcome to Prop Points. We got Monday Night Football tonight, but I don't have any props I like. Good night, everybody. I got to come up with something here. So last week, knowing that Bijan was struggling a little bit in the zone blocking scheme and knowing that Algier seemed a little bit more comfortable, I'm like, I'm going to go over the Algier yardage. He rips off an 8-yarder first carry, and then that's it. That was it. I mean, but to the point, it happened this week. So I think we have to accept that Algier is going to be a factor, and it is what it is. He's pretty good in this scheme. He's pretty patient, and he's pretty good. You know what I mean? He's got power. Yeah. So it's just one of those deals. I tell my kids when things don't go your way, hey, suck it up, man. I'm not selling low. In fact, I said to buy last week, even though we had these concerns, and I'm quite concerned about it. And as I wrote in the trade article, and my angle was this, okay, now he's sharing a little bit more than we thought. So we need a break. Where can we get a break? Oh, look, the schedule. It's good, really good. Like, and I said, and no better than this week against Carolina, which he crushed. Now you got Seattle, Tampa, Dallas, New Orleans. It's pretty good. And then Denver. You should get volume in all of the, maybe not Tampa, but they're bad against the run anyway. But we're looking at some nice volume here for Bijan the runner.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's sort of like Bijan is not necessarily going to be like the I drafted Bijan, so I win my league automatically.
Right.
But you're
not
not
McCaffrey.
You're not losing your league because you took Bijan Robinson in the top 5 this year. And I think that the great thing for both of these guys is the Zach Robinson offense just looks so good right now. And they're really trending up. You saw the Tampa Bay game, you saw the Carolina game. This is an offense that we can really trust, and there's going to be scoring opportunities for both of these players. Love trying to get Tyler Algier as a throw-in on any sort of trade you can make, because his contingent upside, if Bijan ever missed a couple of weeks, he'd be an RB1 because of the quality of this offense. And another,
by the way, real quick before I forget, Bijan fantasy playoffs at the Raiders versus the Giants at DC. That's pretty damn good, man.
That's really, really good for sure. And another offense where we're really trusting the running backs, the Seattle Seahawks, Ryan Grubb has been a automatic like ATM machine for running back production. You've seen Ken Walker averaging 22 points per game now. Walker has been incredible. He had 8 receptions. John, he's got 21 catches on the year. His career high is 29. He's going to have that in like 2 weeks. But even in the weeks that Ken Walker was missing, you saw Zach Charbonnet step up and give you those 2 usable weeks. So this has been the worst finish for a Seattle running back this year is 14 points scored. This is just one we can kind of lean our hats on. Your thoughts on the Seattle running back production, the sustainability of it, and your initial thoughts on the Seattle offense in general with Grubb?
I mean, it's going well. Like they're running off a bunch of plays. Like, as you mentioned here, all the running back numbers look really good. You know, like Walker and Charbonnet have 100 carries already between them. That's pretty good. And Geno is even running. Yet Geno also leads the NFL in attempts and completions and yards. So a high volume offense here. And yeah, I was very into Walker this year. I was actually a Walker hater. I always said he was really talented. I always say, oh, he can teleport from one area of the field to another, like like he's in the Matrix or something like that. But he also bounces, too many runs, and looking for the big play, and he gets hurt a little bit. But this year, I was like, okay, his ADP fell a little bit. He was like a 5th rounder. I'm like, I'm in on that. Come on, a guy with that talent. So yeah, it was a pretty good call. I think that they've devoted resources to the O-line over the years. It seems to be okay, coming in, hanging in there, better blocking it up for the run. But yeah, we're good. I mean, I think we're feeling pretty good about it. And if I'm Ryan Grubb, by the way, and I'm in this position, I'm doing everything I can to do a good job. I'll burn the midnight oil because I'd be so afraid of people calling me Ryan Scrub. You know what I mean? I want to be good. I don't want to be called Ryan Scrub. A scrub is just such a bad word, isn't it?
No, nobody calls Ryan Scrub on this show, John. We got this kind of running back production. I don't even like, at the end of the day, it's like Ryan Grubb also doing this. It just shows when NFL teams make bold hires at the coordinator position, oftentimes we get this sort of production, like out of nowhere. We talk about Mike McDonald. He's the head coach now. I love inspired hires. You see so many guys just kind of go through the ringer and then get another opportunity. I hope this inspires more teams to do things like go and get that college coordinator, maybe go and get that guy before he's been an offensive coordinator, because it's just been awesome to see this.
You're trying to catch lightning in a jar. That's what you're doing. You're trying to catch lightning in a jar with a coordinator, an ascending guy, like a Ben Johnson.
Absolutely. And we talked about Zach Robinson's offense. We talked about Ryan Grubb. We talked about Ben Johnson earlier, talked about Slowick. So we've talked about a bunch of sharp coordinators. Another coordinator who is really, really getting a ton of production, Liam Cohen in Tampa Bay. And I think everybody's on like, hey, I got this team figured out. It's Chris Godwin's a wide receiver 1. Mike Evans is close to it. Baker Mayfield playing the best ball of his career. Bucky Irving, so glad I added him earlier in the year. He's a baller. But Sean Tucker comes out of not nowhere, but Sean Tucker gets his opportunity, has 190 combined yards on only 27. I think he played 27 snaps, something like that.
Wow.
It was wild. But I think this is a player that's given people a lot of confusion here. Is this a one-game wonder, or is this I can't put this away, I've seen it, I've got to get this kid Tucker more touches? Second-year player, Syracuse, would have been a day 2 pick, but he got injured. So the Bucks get him as an undrafted free agent. He's fully healthy. He looked a lot like Syracuse Sean Tucker. Rachaad White might miss a few more weeks as well. But in a week where there's a lot of options on the wire at running back, sort of your comfort level adding Tucker, using Fab on him, it's a weird situation where there's a lot of polarizing opinions.
Yeah, for what it's worth, when I first popped in Tucker, I like to let comps come to me. I'm a big comp person, and sometimes they're absurd, but this one was pretty absurd. And I said, look, this is just an initial thought, and he's a poor man's version of it, but like a big dude like that who can get to the perimeter and just run like a track meet. You kind of remind me a little Bo Jackson. I know that's going way back. I know Bo. I know Bo's a freak and all that, but it came to me, and I never said he was going to be Bo Jackson, but in terms of like a big dude who could run away from guys, basically. That kind of was Sean Tucker, but I also think there's a reason he slipped a little bit in the draft. He's got probably some limitations. I don't know if he's a real great make you miss guy. Maybe the hips are a little stiff, and I've been on Rashad. I kind of know Rashad actually after, watching him at the Senior Bowl, and I sought out an interview with him, and I love the dude, no doubt. I love the dude, and he was my number 1 running back pick last year. And he crushed. He did crush. And I know that they love him in Tampa. And he's an easy guy to like because he's very humble, down to earth, works hard. He knows that he comes from kind of humble beginnings. He once paid his way through JUCO by himself just to play football. But, I talked with him in June of 2023, and he talked about how he built himself up to, withstand the rigors of, handling all those carries and touches, which, by the way, worked because he took a beating last year and he kept coming. But I do think that compromised him a little bit of his speed. Not that he was ever, Barry Sanders, but I'd have to lean toward Tucker being a little bit of a fluke. But I do think it's a problem. I think he could be rotated in there going forward a little bit, at Rashad's cost. It crushes Rashad. But the one thing I'll say, if they are down 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, it's Rachaad White o'clock if he's healthy. Like they're still going to use it. He's got some. Come on, man. He's got some of the best hands I've ever seen at running back. Yeah, he's a very good receiver. He's also a very good blocking back. Rachaad White's not going to disappear. I think you kind of nailed it. Like Sean Tucker's a guy where I'm fine adding him, but I'm not fine spending a lot of fab on. It's more of a short-term thing. And also Bucky looks great. Like Bucky had over 100 combined yards, and they love Bucky as well. So it's really a fun offense. This offense is just super productive. It shows the next man in, and just a name to keep in the back of your mind, everyone. If Chris Godwin or Mike Evans did miss time, I know Sterling Shepard's getting work now, but Jalen McMillan is back to being healthy. That's a name to keep in the back of your mind. You saw it with Tucker. You might get some usable weeks out of Jalen McMillan if either of those guys miss time down the stretch. That was a player. I love that dude.
Stud, right? So team.
So another guy that I chopped it up with real quick. Awesome guy. Awesome guy. I even joked around with him, like goofing off a little off color, and we were laughing. So I love me some Jalen McMillan. I like that kid a lot. By the way, you're questioning about best OC of the year. My answer was, in fact, Liam Cohen. They're absolutely crushing it. I actually went back and looked. He took a little respite from being on McVay's staff. he ran the offense in Kentucky in 2021, and they were 36 of 130th in points for. Then he left. Then they fell to 112th out of 131 without Liam Cohen.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like, and again, it's a inspired hire. You love seeing these guys kind of bounce around. I love seeing the guys that have been OCs at the college level. Definitely some interesting names there. But Liam Cohen, he's a name to keep in mind where he's got that college experience. He's going to be up for some jobs. We saw how quickly Dave Canales got that job in Carolina coming from Tampa Bay. I mean, the proof is sort of in the pudding with Liam Cohen. Some really exciting coordinators this year for sure. And there will be some open jobs coming up. One job that we anticipate will be open this offseason is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Complete train wreck there. They've got New England this week in London. But Evan Ingram, John, returns to a 10-catch, 10-target, 100-yard performance. How impressed are you with Evan Ingram and his role moving forward? Is this sort of like, hey, Evan Ingram finishes as tight end 5 overall in 2022, tight end 2 overall in 2023, and now, hey, we're back. Rest of the way, this guy's just going to do it.
Yeah, I think they're back. I think he's back. I mean, that was would he catch all 10 targets, right? I mean, it was just like, picked up where they left off last year. I was in on Ingram last year and this year, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that it's some about Trevor Lawrence and the offense, and Doug Peterson's always been a tight end guy, that is just conducive to Ingram being a high volume guy. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, when was the last time I guess maybe the big play to Brian Thomas, but how many air yard plays are we getting from Trevor Lawrence these days? Like, not many. Thomas has helped, but I mean, I've noticed that Trevor Lawrence is like the king of the schematic matchup. Certain matchups, cover 2, 2 high safeties are good. And that's good for, Kirk and Ingram. He's a little bit of an inside out guy. I mean, throwing the rock at the end of the day. So while Brian Thomas has, by the way, been my biggest surprise, I thought he would be a little bit more of a project. And yet he's just coming out there like he's been there 5 years. But I think Evan Ingram, he doesn't have the upside that he showed late last year because of Thomas. But I think you're pretty locked in based on what we saw last week. If he's healthy, he's a top 7 guy at worst.
I think you nailed it there. Definitely a guy that you want to trust moving forward. And yeah, you nailed it. If you take away that Indianapolis game, it's really been poor sledding for Trevor Lawrence, like surprisingly bad quarterback play there. And that sort of seems like a situation where the head coach change might give that team a spark. It just seems like they're going in circles here with Doug Peterson. The team they're playing against, though, John, New England Patriots, they lose the game to Houston. They get down bad early. But Drake Maye showed us what we wanted to see for fantasy. 3 touchdown passes. He's got a big arm. He's athletic. He's got scrambling ability. Leads New England with 38 rushing yards. And I know a lot of it was garbage time and comeback mode, but they're going to be in that situation a lot. Sort of your expectations for Drake Maye, rest of season, and sort of your initial reactions to seeing him last week in week 6.
Certainly very encouraging start. It's always nice when you know you're working with something here physically, big. He's like Drew Bledsoe with mobility, that's great. I mean, that's a great start, but it's also nice to see that skill set be utilized basically right out of the gate. Sometimes we're screaming at TVs like, why don't you do this and that? Well, I didn't watch that whole game, by the way, but I mean, certainly an encouraging start. The one thing is the sample size is a big deal. Now that there's a little tape on him, I think we're seeing that with CJ Stroud, by the way. I am a believer in the sophomore slump because, Stroud crushed it. So a lot of defensive coordinators, especially those in their division and that they're set to play, they're spending the whole off season figuring out the damn cheat code. And, I think they've kind of figured it out a little bit. Stroud's still going to be good, but it's harder, So as we move forward, we'll see how he reacts and how defenses react. Also, we got to see exactly what coverage shells he's good or bad against. But hey, for now, It's an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett. He's more talented, extends plays probably a little bit better, and I think it's an upgrade for, he gives Pop Douglas a chance now. That's the only volume receiver you can count on. All apologies to Jalen Polk, but hello, it's Douglas and it's Hunter Henry. So those two guys get a slight bump now.
Yeah, Pop Douglas, 9 targets, 3 out of the last 4 weeks. I was waiting around for Jalen Polk like you were, John. This week I said I'm not even talking about him on the waiver wire show. I'm only talking about Pop Douglas. He earned that. I want to get you out of here soon. Before I do that, who is going to be the league winner at quarterback this year? Usually we see it over the second half of the season when we look at like win rates in places like the FFPC, the NFFC. There's always 1 or 2 quarterbacks who sort of separate from the pack, and we say that was the guy you needed to draft. Who's going to be the guy this year, John, if you had to bank on one rest of the season?
Well, not to brag, but I'll say the same answer as I said in April, May, June, July, and August. Jordan Love is my guy. Now, it's not going to be easy for him to beat Jaden Daniels, let's say, if Daniels doesn't get hurt in a point per game basis, but I've been begging people to trade for Jordan Love on the site now for a month. I still don't think we've seen the best of him. I had some data last week. He was my number 1 prop play. Unfortunately, on the site, I freaking lost it because I put it up too late. But on the VSiN television show, I had it over 256.5. He hit that by 1.5 yards. That was my number 1 prop. Ironically, on the website, I freaking lost it. So, by the way, I'm going to be putting up these props earlier in the week because I'm hurting myself by putting them up on like Saturday night because it was bet up. Probably because I'm out there freaking pumping it up. So like I'm out there on a gambling network pumping up Jordan Love. All of a sudden, oh, wait, the prop went up 2-3 yards. I'm like, I just screwed myself. But the bottom line to me is, if you read what I write and, my thoughts and opinions, I've been a little anti-cheat code, actually, because, look, I was doing this professionally when freaking Cordell Stewart was the original cheat code. I believe that was in 1997. So I know all about the damn cheat code, but I also know that the cheat code does increase the risk of the players. I'm like a fantasy actuary over here, like, oh yeah, sure, love to have them, but the insurance policy is going to be, my premiums are going to be a little higher because the guy's on pace to run 140 times this year, like, so let's say Jaden Daniels. So I've always been, my ideal quarterback is a guy who wins from the pocket, and that's predictable and sustainable, like a Drew Brees or something. Aaron Rodgers, of course, in his prime, but also in his back pocket, he has second reaction ability. He can scramble and run. And I said last year that all I need from Jordan Love is give me 50 attempts and 200 plus yards, and everything's going to take care of itself. He literally got exactly 50, I believe, and he had the 4 rushing touchdowns. So I think Jordan Love is it. I think he is him, as they say. And little rocky start here. A couple more interceptions than we thought, but the dude is still QB3 right now in points per game.
Yeah, and in my leagues and your leagues, John, those interceptions, they don't count nearly as much as those touchdown passes. And Jordan Love is averaging 3 touchdown passes a game. And now he gets Christian Watson back. Tucker Kraft has emerged. Ward Daddy, Jaden Reed is incredible.
They can't run the ball in. They can't run them in. I've been saying it all summer. Like, they can't run. They're not going to run in for touchdowns. They're throwing for more, or the higher percentage of their touchdowns are going to be thrown than any other team in the league, I said.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you talked about, the two-way ability, scrambling quarterbacks. I think a lot of people circling Lamar Jackson, circling Jaden Daniels, you're feeling happy if you drafted both of those guys, but it's the Jordan Love threat is real down the stretch. This guy looks incredible. I think he's going to lead the NFL in touchdown passes. It's sort of a low bar for him now. He's 3 behind Baker, but at this rate, I think he's just heating up. I'm completely with you. Real rapid fire, in or out on Nick Chubb when he comes back from injury. Offense looks awful. Out. I'm out as well. Yeah. I like that one. And then, John, before we talk about a trade candidate, one more player to get your opinion on. your enthusiasm level for, you know what? Let's skip that one. Let's go with the Philadelphia offense. Is this Philly offense broken? They just can't seem to get it going at all. You got Nick Sirianni yelling at the crowd, talking trash after they beat the Browns. It's really some bad vibes out of Philly. The Tampa Bay loss, and then the slight win over a Cleveland team that can't get out of its own way.
Oh, it's bad. I do think it's broken. And I think it's probably Jalen Hurts' fault. I mean, I was on record, me with my interactions with these guys. I'm like, I sat in a little, like if you're at like a conference, you get like in a little circle with people. It happens to me over the years where I get in these circles, and then I remember one time when my first combine, I was in a circle talking with dudes, talking ball, and then freaking Bill Parcells pulls up to the circle. I'm like, I literally could feel his aura. You know what I mean? I did something similar with Jalen Hurts. He was in, he was a second round pick. He was like, I don't know, the sixth quarterback that year. People weren't all over him. So I'm just sitting there talking with some people for like 6 minutes in a little semicircle with Jalen Hurts. And I'm like, you know what, man, this guy is mature beyond his years. He's wise, but he's an old soul, all that stuff. And I'm like, I'll go to battle with this guy. And I said it a million times on Sirius, but unfortunately, that seems to have changed because my man got paid, and my man basically got, in my opinion, a little entitled now. And I think he's just kind of running the show and maybe not running the offense as they would like, with Kellen Moore not throwing the ball in the middle of the field. So it's not great. And I've always said that Sirianni was weird. I mean, from the jump. And by the way, full disclosure, I think this is weird. I just moved 2 months ago from a town in South Jersey. Nick Sirianni freaking lived like 5 blocks away from where I live. By the way, Kellen Moore lives in the same town. He almost bought my house, actually. But Nick Sirianni like walks around sometimes in the town like a regular dude. Like a guy now is like, yeah, I went to the pub, the bar, and there's Sirianni having a beer. I'm like, that's a little weird. I don't know. I'm sorry. Don't you think that's weird?
It's a little too comfortable when you're the Eagles coach in one of the biggest media cities in the country. It's sort of like you're kind of asking for undue attention. I think the guy likes the attention. It's always a weird vibe with Sirianni. I know like there's been multiple interactions with fans, multiple interactions with media. I remember just multiple weird things. Yeah, it's a little awkward. Odd right there. He's awkward guy for sure. John, give us a player to trade for, or a player to trade away, or both. Your call.
Well, I saw your note there alluding to the Cowboys. So I'll go there because I do think that that's a buying opportunity, because I said it last year when they got their asses kicked by the Niners. Was that week 5? I mean, they were in the doldrums there. People were being laughed at, but this is why I look into every team in their upcoming schedule. So I knew that, and I looked at the schedule. I'm like, you know what? They're going to get it going here. Like, look at this schedule, and they can't run the damn ball. So I went out there and said, trade for Dak Prescott. Get him. I did it myself in a couple of my leagues, and boom, he was the QB1 down the stretch, right? So right now he's only the QB 17 in points per game. He's off this week. They got the Niners this week. I think that'll probably be a shootout. Because, by the way, the Niners are going to have my guy Ricky Pearsall by then, so they're going to be pretty loaded. But after that, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Houston, Washington, Giants, Cincinnati, Carolina, Tampa, Philly. That's pretty good. So I would trade for Dak if I didn't have a needle-moving quarterback, and certainly CeeDee Lamb. And Ferguson, my guy Ferguson as well.
Yeah, I love trading for Ferguson. Ferguson was going to be one guy I talked about. I think he's a really solid trade candidate for like weeks now, because stability, the secondary target, he's locked in. And yeah, John, you're right. Last year this was like the Dallas Cowboys staff. They figured it out. CeeDee Lamb, pre-bye week was wide receiver 13, post-bye week, wide receiver 1, averaged 28 points per game post-bye week. So we hope for that rational coaching after a beatdown. Let's just get back to what worked last year. John, let everybody know once again where they can find your work.
FantasyPoints.com. The website's crushing it. You are now a contributor. I mean, you want to talk about good vibes. I'm a big vibe person, and just so people know like how that all came about. I had another website. I won't even list it. By the way, do not give a rat's ass about that old site. It's amazing to me. I own a site for 25 years and do not care. It's like it never happened. I like the challenge of starting up fresh and all that. But I was, I'm I'm older than all the other guys. And I'm like, man, do I really want to do this again? Go through all this, because it's a lot to start up a website. But the dudes that I had and that I work with they were literally just too awesome. Scott Barrett and Graham Barfield and Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley. And like, these are great guys, and they're really smart. I'm like, let's do it. And it's just the really great vibes all across the board, and we're crushing. And I think Fantasy Points is going to take over. I think in 5 years, we're going to be the standard. My vision was the PFF of fantasy. I think we're kind of there already.
Yeah, the guys you mentioned are great. And big shout out again to Brett Whitefield and Ryan Heath. They've also been on press coverage. So yeah, big shout out to everything you guys are doing over there. Check out all of John's work. Also check out my new Sleepers podcast. We've got that dropping on Player Profiler YouTube and also on the Player Profiler Podcast Network. Sleepers, Streamers, and Stashes. And I got Ray Garvin coming on with me this week, podcasting, doing a Dynasty Life a little bit later in the week. And make sure you're checking out School of Scott. You got to find that over on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network. You can also subscribe simply to School of Scott. I'm Theo Gremminger. Big shout out to John Hansen. John, this was a lot of fun. Stick with us here at Press Coverage all season long. We're going to give you everything you need to crush your leagues this season.